So Chinese students have been really loyal to our universities and to continue to study here, and that is different to some of our other students from other countries. I think because we've had this really long history with China, and also because our universities really doubled down when the borders closed. I mean, we still have 30,000 students who are sitting offshore at the moment studying. And a lot of those students, to be very honest with you, if they're in their second or third year of their degree, they've already invested. And so they're not going to walk away from their studies. So what we've done is made sure that they're still getting the experience as best we can offer it online. I think it's a little challenging at the moment though, because we have no sign of when we may be able to get those students back. And so that's the challenge for us. We want to keep those students, but we also want new students. So I'm fairly confident that our existing students will stay. They're loyal, we've got a great relationship. The next challenge is actually new students. Yeah, and so this is the really challenging piece of the puzzle. As I said, we've got 30,000 students offshore who are already studying with us, but of course we want new students to come to Australia because we have a great offering. And so what our universities are doing in a very practical way, and we've heard some of that, ANU have actually got people in China who are working with students and recruiting. All of our universities do. But I think the most important thing we can do is actually send some strong signalling as a nation that Australia is open for business. Now, we don't know when we'll be open for business, but that's okay. Everyone understands we have to do this in a safe way. But if we could just get the messaging that we are open for business and when we can, we want to welcome you, I think that would be a really important kind of aspect to it.
Yeah, so the message is to stay connected.
Stay connected, absolutely. So the Group of 8 universities undertake 70% of all university-based research in Australia. So, we're doing the heavy lifting in research. All of that research usually, or most of that research, is with global partners. Our biggest partner is the EU as a block of countries. The US follows that, and then China. What's important to understand about the Chinese research market is it's grown the fastest over a really short period of time than the EU or China, than the US. So what that means is there's a lot of connectivity between our researchers, and we don't want to lose that either, because research is a global pursuit and we can work together on a whole, solving the world's problems, developing a vaccine. We're doing research in diabetes for children. There's so many things we're doing, agriculture, you name it, we're doing it. And so it's really important for us in Australia not to lose that sort of that contact with China and those research collaborations, because they will underpin our future in terms of changing lives, saving lives, all that important research that we do. So it's something that is very important that we want to maintain.
What we are now seeking to do is to deepen and widen our partnering activities so that we bring collaborative research into the mix, joint or dual degree arrangements into the mix as well, additional to the SEMS joint and dual degrees that we offer. Yeah. And so I think, ironically, the fact that we have been so prominent in SEMS for a decade has, if you like, been a source of relative inertia in us becoming more adventurous with partnering, both in SEMS, outside of the SEMS master's degree, but also beyond SEMS.
So the opening up of more capacity in the mainland for students, I think, is a very significant trend. And we've seen a lot of capacity added in the undergraduate space, and we're now starting to see Chinese universities open up more capacity in the postgraduate space. Over time, what that means for us is that Chinese students will have more opportunities without leaving home. And over the long term, what that probably means is that the Chinese market, like many other countries, will become more of an exchange, more of a study abroad market, and perhaps not so much a market where students need to leave the country in order to be able to access high quality undergraduate or postgraduate study. But we've seen online, transition over time to ever better quality delivery, more digital resources, more interactive, much higher quality production. The big question going forward is whether this shift has convinced the Chinese market that there is such a thing as high quality, high brand online education. I think they will discover that, because we have in Australia and they certainly have in America, and that will open up a new market, but it will be very competitive. So the challenge that we are all contemplating at the moment is, how do we deliver high quality online in a way that differentiates us as an Australian provider? And the other thing about online, which is it's an opportunity to dispel a myth, is that it is somehow cheaper than face-to-face. What we're all actually finding is that the production costs of really high quality digital online content are very high, and it costs at least as much, if not more, than face-to-face delivery at this stage in the transition. I think we all want our children to have that really rich, deep undergraduate experience on campus, face-to-face, developing their brains and developing their social skills. But it's the postgraduate space and the non-school leaver space where we're going to see, I think, over the next decade, huge market share shift to online. I think that China recognises that it is there is a duality at play here, where they are both the world's largest consumer of education services, but also now a very large provider of education services. In fact, Australia has 8% of the globally mobile market. China already has 9%. Over time, I think we're going to see China become more and more a competitor and less a consumer of education services. So international education, I think, is going to change over the next 10 years. And I think Australia's got a very important part to play in that experience. And how much of our research will we be able to sustain with our Chinese partners? 49% of everything we publish in Australia in the research space is a joint international collaboration. And much of that is with Chinese partners. If we really want to keep that going in order to be able to keep Australia at the forefront of R&D worldwide. I heard at the UA conference last week that we're 0.03% of the world's population, but we produce 4% of the world's research. China is an important part of how we achieve that astounding statistic. Content, in a different format. I think that's a big challenge that we face. But we also face challenges in terms of how we brand Australia. We have an awful lot of time and energy going into state-based marketing. Australia is fragmented and divided, and I think that we would enjoy much greater success if we were able to set aside our federation and come together strongly under a brand Australia.
I think our whole future in education depends on us being able to adapt. There are a lot of people who think that as soon as the borders open, everything's going to go back to normal. And I'm not one of those people. I think education is going to be changed forever, in particular online education, and it's up to us to really capitalise on our experiences and what we know about remote learning and build our future. We've got to be out there and really changing our mode of delivery. We have opportunities in what I call the form of learning. I think content of learning is everywhere. You can buy it, access to it very, very cheaply. But that's really not what sophisticated learning is about. It's about how we as educationalists design the experiences around that content to make it possible for students to learn. And we've been doing that at my university. We've got transdisciplinary learning experiences where students are working with industry, they're integrating work into their learning, they're tackling real problems, not textbook problems where there are easy solutions. So we're already gearing up for that in a big way. You have to have some competitive edge. Plus we have a major role to play in rebuilding the economy, just as universities were seen as the solution after the World War II. in terms of rebuilding the economy. That's what universities have to do. We have to play a really important role in building Australia's economy.
I think what's happened in China is that there is a particular generic term for of how people apply machine learning to education, and it's called adaptive learning. And so the application of adaptive learning, for instance, in financial education by a company such as Golden Education is world class and world leading. And this means, for instance, that a Chinese student doing a professional certification, say a CFA, that student is engaging at their learning frontier because the system is serving up stuff that's just where the student needs to learn, not stuff that they're bored with, not stuff that they're overly challenged with, it's stuff where it's what's called the zone of proximal development. And so those sorts of systems are fairly pervasive now in China, coming out of the Chinese edtech sector. We focus upon the process of learning and the process of engagement of the learner with materials, and more importantly with creating a process for lifelong learning. And that is a fair way ahead of where most, say, Chinese universities are at, which are more about how do you deliver content using technology. So I think that's an area of competitive advantage of Australian institutions. The second part where Australian institutions have a bit of an advantage over Chinese institutions is that most Chinese institutions are still not engaging with business. In other words, the whole concept of internships or work integrated learning units or career guidance that allows you to taste a job, that sort of stuff is not the average day-to-day fare of Chinese institutions. Whereas there's very good providers in Australia, usually private sector companies, who've figured out platforms to integrate Australian providers with employers or with startups or with engagement with society. And that engagement with society is where some Australian institutions are well ahead, including and generally ahead of most of the world.
If I'm honest, I don't think universities are going to be able to do that on their own. Their expertise is in the areas and fields that they teach in. I think our universities are going to need to continue to build on the partnerships that they've already established with leading edtech firms, online program management providers who will help them design deep and rich learning, personalised learning at scale. To do that, we need to do much better with our digital engagement and digital delivery. There are some terrific Australian edtech firms and there are other international edtech firms already in partnerships with Australian institutions. So I think both parties continuing to work together, you bring together the best of our hundreds of years of our university sector and how well regarded that is internationally with experts in learning design and engaging pedagogy. There are ways in which the on-campus experience needs to continue to have a priority, but we can supplement that with the kinds of education that China and other more digitally advanced economies are already delivering. We need to continue to make sure that the courses that we teach are educationally sound and engaging, and that they do lead to good graduate employment outcomes, either in Australia or back in the home country of the student or even elsewhere in the world. I'd like to see Australian institutions really thinking about an Australian education as setting domestic and international students up for a potentially global career, and we need to really crystallise what are the benefits of an Australian education.
major two opportunities in China. One is the traditional transnational education experience sector, in which we collaborate with existing education institutions to deliver full accredited qualification under the Australian qualification framework. The other major opportunity is to partner with industries, where we provide customized bespoke training solutions, working in collaboration with industry, where the learners are from the industry professionals, and we issue a TAFE certificate versus a AQF certification. There are legal and contractual differences, which, if you as an Australian provider enter into the market, enter into a legal and contractual arrangement with Chinese entity, you need to be adaptable, to be prepared to enter into an agreement which looks completely different from your standard legal agreement with any other entity outside China. Additionally, you also have to juggle and navigate through the national and provisional government level regulations. To work with Chinese, to have your program registered in China is a lengthy process. So if you are, it's certainly not transactional. So if you're looking for a intake, a student start to be enrolled into a program in September, which is the academic calendar year in China, you need to start a year ahead. The negotiation and the registration process. I guess they complement each other. So how we position ourselves and how we see our offshore and in China engagement is that it's our brand ambassador as well. So we have a presence in China, so students and institutions and governments know about TAFE News as well, know about our institution. But also particularly now during the pandemic and post-pandemic, I think if the borders remain closed for the unforeseeable future, and institutions are struggling to pick up the numbers and going back to the pre-COVID level of student enrollment number, offshore has huge opportunity. So if they can't come in, we should reach out.
Maintain those.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there are lots of institutions have in-country presence already, and TAFE News as well used to have. Now we are looking into it as well. That's an area. It's also a cost-saving measure, but more so it's more responsive in country, where they can visit any given institution within 24 hours with the bullet train system in China, whereas we can't be there within that short period of time. Yeah.
For us was expansion by acquisition. So we acquired a community college of City University Hong Kong, and acquired it in a way where we acquired a majority ownership but had to transition to an independent university college status in 5 years, which we've just achieved in June this year. So our big hurdles were having to work with the accreditation bodies and the Education Bureau in Hong Kong to be able to move to independence of both program and institution accreditation. And the other big hurdle has been having the ability to continue to invest so that we can have that transition happen, which is not just independence from program delivery, but independence in terms of moving to a new independent location and campus. We've got international campuses in Dubai, Malaysia, Hong Kong. So for us, that gives us a really, really good footprint for program diversity and program delivery. And each of our campuses, and Hong Kong is included here, we always have a blend of locally accredited courses and Australian accredited courses. So we're getting a real mix of making sure that we deliver to local needs, local market needs, as well as having that Australian education flavour. What that does then is provide a richness of experiences across all of our campuses. So when our students choose a campus or choose to be a mobile student, they're getting a lot of diversity in their education. I think it is replicable. It's been very successful for us.
I think for us though, we've taken a different approach in rather than just relying on more traditional forms of transnational education, we have that blend between locally accredited institutions and programs as well as the Australian accredited programs. And I think that blend is unique and very advantageous. And I think if other universities considered that, that would be very helpful for them as well. So there hasn't been any disruption to college operations. We've done two things in knowledge of what we've now been communicated, what has now been communicated. The first is we haven't had to change our curriculum dramatically in any way, and I think we were worried that we might have to. So what we've done is we've, for our associate diploma students, we have a compulsory topic called Contemporary China Studies, and there's now a topic in that about the national security law. For students who don't have that as a compulsory subject, we offer a session every semester on the laws. And the other thing we've done is we've got to demonstrate affirmative action to prevent unrest. So we've made a modification to our code of conduct for staff and students, which now provides us with the ability, or provides a lever for us to now respond should someone start to incite political unrest on campus. So they're the two things, the code of conduct and the topic in the cultural studies. There's no research we conduct that we think would be of concern in terms of the national security laws, and we asked very specific questions about research during the session we had with the Education Bureau, and it looks like we could even research on political unrest and on the independent movement in Hong Kong, as long as it was an academic independent study and not a study that was trying to invoke some sort of unrest.
I think the calibre of the speakers that you've been able to attract speaks to the importance of the forum. It's rare, to have gathered together speakers of this calibre, headlined by Julie Bishop, who was awesome. Vicky Thompson, John Shields, Phil Honeywood. These are all great speakers, and they're here today because international education matters so much to Australia, and not just obviously for the income, but for the soft diplomacy in particular. We do so much for the country in terms of stimulating the local economy and in terms of building those bridges, those connections, in particular with Southeast Asia and also with China.
Absolutely. I think one of the downsides of the pandemic and everyone isolating, we've become very individual and inward looking, and we have to become outward looking as fast as possible.
Yes, I do.
Like yourself.
And particularly today, it's just such an array of participants, and the case studies and the insights are very rich. And you can see people in the audience taking photos of slides and going, I'll take that. It's been really, really good. I think the choice of panellists has been particularly effective.
I think they're critical. I think online and in person, it's really important to share ideas and experiences. We build partnerships, we build trust, and an even more united presence when we go offshore. I was lucky enough to hear the Singapore High Commissioner speak at the Universities Australia conference. He's a former international student in Australia, and one of his pieces of advice, which has really resonated with me, Australia, when your institutions go overseas to talk about study in Australia, think about more cooperation. You don't need to be competing. You offer something similar in the education that you offer. Focus more on the opportunities for cooperation and partnership when you go abroad. And I think events like today's forum and others help us build those networks and relationships that mean we can cooperate more when we're offshore.
Even more so now. And in fact, one of my sort of calls to action, if you like, to organisations like the Australia-China Business Council is keep doing what you're doing. Because if we stop talking and we stop bringing people together, even if we can't bring people together face to face, then we're in a world of pain. The best thing to do is to keep those people-to-people relationships going. So this sort of forum is absolutely critical to ensuring we keep that dialogue open.